G'day fixers. A couple of my viewers have asked me a question about the AccuCut versus the Straight Edge Guide by Craig. Now I've got videos setting up each of these tools and that's where those questions came from. So let's jump straight in to see why you might want to spend twice as much on the AccuCut compared to the Straight Edge Guide. Before we do that though, you might ask yourself the first question, do I need to spend that money at all? For a couple of years before I picked these tools up, I just used the old poor man's track saw. Piece of plywood, straight edge along there, set to your circular saw, and cost you basically nothing out of scrap. You can make it as long as you want. I've got a video on how to build one of those if you don't want to spend any money on your straight edge cutting. However, having picked up these tools, I have since no longer owned the homemade one because it's been cut up for other projects. These tools are great, but they do different things, and you might consider one, the other, or maybe both. Let's look at the Straight Edge Guide first. It is half the price of the AccuCut, which is, I will point out, just for the track, not including the cutting tool, half the price of the Festool. So before anyone jumps on, yes, a Festool track saw is an amazing piece of engineering and is brilliant, but just the track alone is double the AccuCut cost, and while it's better, I don't think it's double better. We'll just lay that one to rest. We're here to compare the more budget end tools, right? This one, cheapest one. I actually use it like this. Now, naturally, it does have double the length, which is 1.2 meters or 4 feet. It will cross-cut a full sheet of goods quite happily, and that's what this is designed for. The lovely thing with this is, it is super simple. It is just a straight edge. There's no carriage or anything that you need to screw your circular saw into, and it has these wonderful repeatable stops on here, which you can set using these guide screws to be the exact cutting width of your circular saw. You do that the first time, and then when you hook this on, these become where you line up your marks to make your cut. So it's very handy and very simple. The advantage of this one over the AccuCut, which basically does the same job, is you don't only have to set this for your circular saw. You can, and I do, use this occasionally for jigsaw work, and my main purpose of owning this for the router. When I'm trying to do dados or housing cuts in very large straight square pieces, then this tool is the one you need, because you can just run your router along those edges, and you can change these cutting guides to be whatever the correct distance from your router bit, depending on the size of the bit, to also do those repeatedly time and time again. It is pretty accurate and it is very quick. The main limitation of the Straight Edge Guide is it basically only works on square-ish or rectangular boards. If you're going to go on funny angles, or you have something that isn't a nice square edge at both ends, then it can't hook on properly. It relies on this sliding stop, and obviously you can extend it out to a full sheet if you get the XL version, but if you don't have those two straight edges, you can't hook this on, and that's how it is designed to work. I've got the full setup video if you want to see the details. So that's the main limitation of this. It is not super accurate because you have to line up to two separate points, and you need square-ish stock for it to hook onto, but it can be used with multiple cutting tools, not just your circular saw. So if this does that job, why would you want the AccuCut? Well, just like our Straight Edge Guide, the AccuCut does come in the standard 1.2 4-foot or 2.4 8-foot, and I have the XL version track stored under here. I don't have the XL or the Straight Edge Guide. I haven't found need for it yet. But I do use the full length of this when I'm breaking down sheet goods. And again, that is what this tool is designed to do. Where does it shine over the Straight Edge Guide? Why are you paying twice as much for this? Well, two answers. Firstly, this. So no, this is not a track saw, okay? Track saw has the plunge function, your Festool, your Makitas, that it is replicating that function, but this is a cutting guide. It is not the same tool. It's a similar tool and of course a much more budget option. The secret is this tray. Now, it will work with most circular saws. Not all circular saws, there are some exceptions, so do be careful, but most popular circular saw brands will run on this sled. You screw it in, and then it runs along that track. Why this sled is important is a few reasons. Firstly, it gives you that extra stability that you're not going to get from hand holding on the straight edge guide. It holds it quite nicely to the track. If you don't believe me, I have a video here showing how accurate the AccuCut is. And secondly, it allows the use of this chip guard. So as you're running along here, firstly, your saw can't wander away from the fence like it can there, but secondly, this chip guard is going to give you a much cleaner cut. And if you've cut plywood with a circular saw, you'll always know you get very bad tear out on the upspin, and that's what this chip guard will help you avoid. It's also replaceable. They're very cheap to replace. They're in 20 bucks Australian to do that. Mine I haven't replaced yet, and I've had it for a couple of years. They'll get there eventually, but it does provide that extra cleanliness on your sharp, crisp edges. The disadvantage, of course, is this will only, as far as I'm aware, work with a circular saw. It is not going to work with your router or your jigsaw, so it's not quite as flexible as the straight edge guide. Having said that, it can do a few things the straight edge guide can't do, and that's angles. So recently I did a bit of a boat deck rebuild, and I had lots of small fiddly cuts that I needed to make with the circular saw, and the pieces were not square. They were boat-shaped and curved in some places, and you simply could not use the straight edge guide for doing that kind of work. And again, if you have got anything that doesn't have two parallel edges to clamp the straight edge guide onto, then the AccuCut with its grip mats on the back is going to be a better choice, because you can literally line it up however you want on whatever you want, and the vast majority of the time it'll move the bench before it moves the track. If you do have form ply or something very slippery, like melamine perhaps, then you can buy these optional, very cheap little clamps which hook out underneath. I like these, I use them from time to time, and that will secure the track down. Ooh, one last thing. One thing you cannot do on the AccuCut, which you would usually associate with a track saw plunge saw system, is that. Just due to the way the sled works, you cannot do 45 or any bevel cuts. This will only take 90-degree cuts. So the straight edge guide again will allow you on either side to do those angled cuts. So this does have its uses, and there is value in owning both of them. The last thing that I'll say for the AccuCut's advantages, we mentioned this sled, which improves the accuracy, is this thing. This is the Rip Cut, also by Kreg, of course, and it is completely compatible with the exact same sled which you have set up to your circular saw, and it is my table saw. I still do not own a table saw, and I have used this to replace that function along with the miter saw a lot of the time. This is an absolutely brilliant tool. It pays for itself just cutting down sheets of plywood in a car park. It's much smaller than the 2.4 meter track, and importantly, it's got a lovely graduated scale on here which you can move, lock down, and if you're making drawers or shelves and you want them all to be 173 millimeters, then you set this up once and you can just cut all day, quickly shift it to the next size that you need for a different piece, cut those out, take that off, whack it straight down onto the AccuCut and break down your next large sheet good. These two in combination have kept me going in this workshop without a table saw for 4 years. They are brilliant bits of kit. This is one of my favorite jigs, and it's like, you can make your own, but it's not that expensive. It's a brilliant thing to have. So there are 3 of the cutting guides from Kreg. If you get any other questions about Kreg gear, then do hit me up. I'm an affiliate for Kreg Australia, and I have used most of their toys for an extended period of time now. Look, if you're just starting out, you don't need to buy these straight off the bat. Get yourself the plywood, look at my jigs video on how to make your free versions, and then when you figure out which ones you need, choose which one you're going to step up to. You don't have to have both of them, but I would probably get the AccuCut over the straight edge guide because it is really just a glorified stick. For routing those dados, you can just use any straight piece of edge, clamp it down at both ends. This is a nicer version of that, but it's not going to be that much more accurate. Whereas the AccuCut, I really, until I can afford to get myself a lovely Festool track saw, this I think has many years of life left in for my size tiny shop. It's a very handy thing to have and much better to use than your straight stick. I hope that answers your question, Rob and others. This is James from Fix It Fingers, and I will catch you on the next one.